Solano Community College TV studio. I am your host, Jess. We have Christian, Jelvert, and Anusha, and today we have a really heated topic, and it is how Gen Z, our generation, views the government. We're going to start off with how we were introduced to government growing up. Then we're going to transition into how Gen Z is currently dealing with government as young adults. And finally, we're going to discuss the what ifs if we think a government can come back from a downfall. To start off, I want, how'd you guys get introduced to government as young adults or as children?
So growing up, when I was a kid, I was not really interested in the government. As every other kid, me and my brother used to watch cartoons in the TV until my father came and then get the remote from our hand, and he just started getting the news. I always thought it was so boring, but what I remember hearing most of the political instability. I feel like government was always changing. So knowingly or unknowingly, I used to hear it from my father talking to my mom, or from the background about what's happening. Even if the good people go into the real good positions, even if he wanted to do good, the other corrupt people surround around him used to pull his or her leg, to pull down, even the good people with the good intention were not being able to contribute to the country. Or also according to the Transparency International 2024 corruptions, so Nepal scored 34 out of 100, and out of 100 out of 180 countries, well below Asia Pacific regional average, for the corruptions.
That's really high up on a list.
I know.
My goodness.
Yeah.
And so you saw through your dad's news,
Yes.
you're watching these good people fall to the knees of everyone around them. Did you understand that, or were you kind of oh, as kids are, they're oh, if you're turning on the news, I'd rather just go play in my room or something like that?
I used to feel that when I was a kid, but growing up, when I was grade 8, and then I little bit got the understanding. Okay, what was happening? There are some people I've been always listening. There are corrupt government, this that, but later growing up, I heard there are good people who wanted to do good, but they cannot contribute good because there are other people around him who just don't give permissions for to contribute the good. I don't know if I could make you understand or not, but yeah.
So in Nepal, you kind of grew up already in that downfall. You never had a good or a good government before it turned bad. You kind of just.
So before I was born, so there was a king in our Nepal. There was king, but later the king was removed, and the country was made democratic. But even it was a democratic, there were other leaders or prime ministers. They kind of felt like they were doing whatever they like. It wasn't of course the democratic systems is actually listening the public's point of view, doing things in their favors, but it didn't turn out to be that.
I can kind of see some similarities, not so much in growing up, because I didn't notice our government corruption until about 2016 when Trump was elected. I feel you can recall, but before that, we considered to have Obama as a good president, stability, and I think that kind of affected my idea of government from a very young age. So yeah, even though you always grew up in that kind of understanding of, oh, these are bad people, I understand seeing a good person and being oh, there's a possibility, there's a hope.
That's right.
And I think that's a really interesting connection to make, even though they're two completely different government systems. Jelvert, do you have any moments in your past where you recall being introduced to the idea of a government?
Uh, yeah, I mean, when you go to school, when you see police enforcement, firefighters, all this help that you get from the
Mhm.
government as well financially. I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't aware that it was provided by the government, but now growing up, you understand that they've been doing all these things for free. Or, okay, well, you gotta pay taxes, okay? But it helps everyone, It's
Mm-hmm.
something you contribute to it so that it can return your investment in a way that it keeps you safe and ideally happy.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of saw the footprints of a government and you understood that those can't be funded by themselves when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs money. That's kind of like the system we set us up for.
Mm-hmm. I remember growing up, I used to think that like the police and the firemen were like independent. Like they were like any other Walmart that you'd see, and it's like, oh, those people are just doing that because they want to. I didn't understand like money growing up. And I feel like no kid has to. Like if you're like 4 or 5 years old, you don't know what money is. So I thought that like people doing jobs did that because they liked it. um, I didn't
Just for
understand.
fun.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. So I'm gonna do that because I want to, not because it pays a lot of money. Um, but I think that's really interesting how like you as a kid just had an underlying feeling of like there's a little more to them what just meets the eye here. Maybe not from as young as like 4 or 5, but definitely like getting older. And Christian, how did you see government? Like, how were you introduced to the idea of a government?
So my school and through when I was a kindergarten to middle school, we were on climate change, like green, like we save trees, and Barack Obama. I see Barack Obama as like one of the presidents that was towards like climate change policies. His administration lowered greenhouse gases in 2015 by 10%, and he received a Nobel Peace Prize, part of it from climate change and some of it from his talking about nuclear disarmament. So, and that was in 2009, his Nobel Peace Prize. And in 2010, his administration funded 85 billion into modernizing nuclear weapons. So for me, I was confused. Like when I was doing research on it, on his policies, I was under the impression he was like a good president.
Mm-hmm. And seeing that kind of like switch, you were like, oh, but you didn't notice that when you were younger?
Yeah, I didn't notice.
Um, I remember in my kindergarten class, we kind of had a garden that was supposed to teach us about being green, being recycling, like you were saying, where we would attempt to grow our own food, like carrots and potatoes and stuff. But we're kids, and the second you leave the garden, you completely forget. But it's interesting that you mentioned Obama because I do remember from my childhood, I would watch my grandpa turn on the news. He'd come and visit, and they'd sleep in the guest room. And every time I woke up, I would see that the Fox News was on the TV. And I had no idea what news was. And so the only thing running through my mind is I want to beat my grandpa, beat in like waking up. I want to like have a little race so then I can watch my cartoons in the morning. Because if I reach the TV first, then I get control. I don't, but you know what I mean. And so I'd wake up, like I'd try to wake up super early just to beat him, and like no, I'm talking like 6:30 in the morning. He's up on the couch, has Fox News on. I'm like, what is he doing? And like you said, the news, I couldn't care less, honestly. But I do remember seeing like this Obama guy on there. But other than being on the Fox News channel, I had no idea what he did, who he was. He seemed cool. My parents never really talked about politics when I was younger, but yeah, he just seemed like a chill guy. I remember for me, I wasn't actually introduced to like the idea of a government until about fifth grade recess. Um, and you know how like fifth graders are curious about everything. So we had this like, how do I even explain it? Like an event, like catalog. It felt like we were reading a Guinness World Record book, but it had like modern events happening in it. Um, and so it mentioned something about like Trump versus Hillary Clinton, if you guys remember that in 2016. And we were going through it, and I was like, what's this? Because they started talking about it. And they're like, oh, there's this like presidential election thing, this, that, the other. I knew what a president was because, you know, growing up, you learn about like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, and you're like, oh, those are presidents of the United States. And like you hear, like you said, like Obama's our president right now. No idea what he did though. And so I remember going home to my mom and my dad and being like, hey, is there like this thing happening? And they're like, oh yeah, that's in a few days. You want to watch it with us? I said, okay, sure. So we sat on the couch and was watching the, I think it was counting the popular votes. You know, when you watch the numbers go like up and down and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thought I had back then was, there's this woman that's running to be president, and I'm a girl, so I want a woman to be my president. I had no idea of policy. I had no idea what they were running for. Later, by having like conversations, I learned that my parents were more like left-leaning, so they also like agreed with like the Hillary Clinton as like being president. So they're like, oh yeah, you know, you go girl, if you want to be president, Jess, you could be president. I said, oh stop, you know. And then I think it was watching like Trump win that night that the entire house just shifted in like energy, and I was like, oh, this is serious. Like I had no idea what was to come, or I barely had an idea of what a government as a body was. But definitely growing up learning about like the three branches and checks and balances, and learning about it from a kind of on the textbook kind of side, and then seeing it in real life, that was interesting to grow up into. Next next question is like kind of going more into your teen years. How did you guys see the government in like your day-to-day lives? Not necessarily I saw this on the news, but like going to the grocery store. Did you
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're okay. Did you see like prices rise, or did you see like more of your peers were talking about like a government as like a body?
Yeah, I did saw that changes after the biggest earthquake that happened in Nepal in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So after like few months, we all, and also like after the corona, we all could see in the news like how is our economic system is like going down. And we could also see when we go to the market, like you said, yeah, we could obviously, because of the economy going down, the prices were being raised, and like we could see like what happened after that, like the prices changes, whereas the earning of the peoples remained still the same. It was hard for people to, you know, even spend the basic day-to-day life.
So you saw like how the government responded to a natural disaster, and then how, even though obviously prices going up to kind of restore society, you noticed that your pay wasn't going up.
Yeah.
Like your parents' pay and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because I feel like that's what a lot of people feel nowadays, where they're like, you know, housing's going up, groceries and gas prices, but the minimum wage is still like staying down, and everyone's like, what are we to do about it? I think that's a really interesting connection, and especially growing up in that time can be very detrimental, because I saw a it was like a blog by this lady named Jennifer Carroll, and she was talking about her daughter, because she's our age, and how living in a kind of deteriorating government can affect like the mental health and the viewpoints of younger people, us. Seeing that slow downfall and realizing that your government's not actually there to catch you, completely like can change your brain and how you see the world around you, you know. One instance I can think of is like the Met Gala or the Grammys or any of these big like high society people events that people used to watch and like be like, oh, you know, I wish I could be there. But you know, it's like watching for entertainment nowadays with Gen Z. I've noticed that we kind of see those things and we scoff. We're like, oh, like why would you flaunt your money in that kind of way? Especially when there's people who are homeless, can't afford groceries, they have to sacrifice so much to just live. But that's for to dive into in a later topic. Christian or Jelbert, how did you guys, you know, see government as like as a teenager?
I mean, teen years, the best example I have of government in action would be the COVID-19 pandemic, you know? I mean, it was the first time you saw such involvement in your daily life. Something new, as they took control of pretty much how you lived. I mean, once the quarantine started, like your social life kind of just died out. I remember, like, I as a teen was like, yay, no school. But even then, you never really thought about the consequences that it would do to your development.
No. Oh, you want to keep? Sorry.
I know one of my friends was actually, his social life just meant so much to him, and he kind of fell into depression.
I know that people, you know, as a species of mammal, we are very social beings. Whether you see yourself kind of more as an antisocial or you're completely extroverted, at the end of the day, you still need even a small community just to feel the sense of like belonging and saneness. And so I remember for COVID specifically, like you said, I was so excited to go home. I was like, I know school for 3 weeks, that's amazing, it's gonna be a great time. But yeah, eventually I started like feeling really sad. All my friends either moved or were going to a different school and we never hung out. I had to completely make new friends once we came back from COVID. And it was just really hard socially, and I think it made me more of a shy person. I feel like a lot of people are very shy nowadays. You know, you don't really talk to your classmates outside of class anymore, even though that was like shown on like movies and like your parents would talk about it, like, oh, this is my friend from high school. I'm like, friend from high school? I still have my like core group, but other than that, I don't really talk to people I used to in high school. So yeah, I think it definitely changed how we communicate with one another on a level that we don't fully understand. Christian, how did you see the government in your teen and growing up years?
So, talking back on COVID, we went Zoom, Google meetings, and I think Joe Biden was pro-vaccine, and we had to take like several vaccines just to like go back to school.
Yeah.
And our masks we had to like wear like pretty much all day, even if you had the vaccine. Some schools. For me as a teen, like well, adult really, but like my dad would say like he got a stimulus check from like I don't know, I think Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
It was kind of like an adrenaline shot, you know, for the economy. I mean, it was bad. No one was really purchasing stuff. No one was really making money. Businesses were closing. claiming bankruptcy. I mean, Chuck E. Cheese, right?
Oh,
They
God.
declared
Yeah.
bankruptcy. Look at them now. I mean, it was just for financial aid that the government was providing to keep things afloat.
Now, to kind of switch topics into a modern era, we're going to go from how we saw the government growing up into how Gen Z is addressing the government currently. I will open the floor up to, what do you see people doing nowadays?
So Nepal changes did not just post about the corruption, but they did bring down the government on September 2025.
I do remember seeing that on TikTok.
Yeah. So it all started with the social media ban. The only government banned 26 social media platforms, but then the GenZ people who were earning from it, or even like most of the peoples are went like going to abroad these days. So even the peoples who is living in the abroad has to be talk through the like messenger or the WhatsApp. So everybody was worried when the social media was banned, but the corruption thing was it's a long back thing that has been going for a long time. And like the Gigi's people started posting about the lavish life of corrupt corrupted governments, like the government's kids.
Mm-hmm.
So people were going crazy. It's like, okay, you're taking our tax money, our money, and like you guys are living the lavish life, and like you're doing nothing for us. You every time when the election comes, you guys says like I'll do this, I'll do that, but when the time comes of like doing things, nothing has been done. And so after that, when like everything was going on, so the changes actually came down on the street to do the peaceful protest. It started with a peaceful protest, but later some other parties people were involved in the protest, and they started like crossing the border while doing the protest. And unfortunately that day, maybe the home minister, he of course he does not accept the fact that he ordered, but the people, like the police started shooting the kids. They were in the moment, the kids were headshot, like being headshot, or like they're shot here and there. And we we are people who are staying abroad for a study or like for other purposes. At first we were like, okay, there is change doing this protest, we were very hopeful like the change is gonna come maybe.
Yeah.
So everybody was very hopeful, like when it's the day here, it's night in Nepal.
Uh-huh.
So when we were sleeping, like there was a morning, so the protest was just started, and we slept like feeling very hopeful about the protest. But then when we woke up next day, we were actually seeing the blood, the violence, like it was very horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you imagine like kids under like 28, or like the genjis under 30, they were being shot. Like they just did protest to like bring the change for their country.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be very devastating. Whole country was mourning, whole country was like devastated. I was pissed off, like my mental state wasn't good. Like I came to college, but my mind was just Nepal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very disturbing. And on the next day, because the incident happened on September 8th, so on September 9th, the million people who were the like relatives or brother or sister or like the parents, they came to support Genji. They were like defending Genji. They came to the street the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then so many things happened. The government buildings were burned down, but at the end, like the government was taken down.
Mm-hmm.
The government was taken down, and now there is a government Balin, so who is doing great things right now. And it has certainly brought the good changes, the protest, even though so many kids were had to face so many kids were died.
Yeah.
But their sacrifices like has brought something in our country right now.
And I do remember seeing this on the news in September last year,
Mhm.
and I thought it was like inspirational that, you know, even though there was a lot of horrific things that happened, at the end, you know, finally getting over those hardships, especially like you mentioned growing up, constantly being in that low, but seeing those lights of hope. I'm assuming even though it felt really hard, you did feel the hope of
Yes.
finally, you know, we can move on as like a people. And I thought that was very inspiring,
It was definitely very inspiring.
especially for America, because the stuff that you said that you grew up with, I'm starting to see in our society now. Talking about demonstrating lavish life, the president had this Gatsby ball, gold, crystal, all this jazz, and all I could think of was that my parents are struggling to figure out how we're gonna budget our groceries, and having to switch brands and having to be like, oh, well, maybe, you know, maybe I don't see the dentist every 6 months, maybe I only see them once a year, or like having to just cut back in order to provide for our family. And like you said, we are having protests in America where sometimes they do get violent, and you hear about these reporters being trampled and shot with like rubber bullets, or you're seeing these people get like absolutely like pushed and like beaten up by law enforcement. And I remember in my ethnic studies class last time we were there, we were watching a like documentary about, I think it was the 1960s, about the you know, the black students coming into like white schools, and how much they were pushing for, we want African American studies, we just want to be taught about our people the correct way. And I remember seeing there was also people, you know, pushing back there, but they were policemen with like batons, you know. It still hurt, obviously, but it's nothing compared to now seeing a full-on military with these shields and with these guns, and it's just terrifying. And seeing that reflection is scary. Even in living in California now, I'm assuming, or in America now, I feel like you're like, oh, I've seen this before, you know, and I can't imagine how that feels. How about you guys? How do you see Gen Z, or anyone, matter of fact, just acting against government nowadays?
Gen Z is probably one of the most highly engaged activist generation, which is politically driven by moral conviction from personal experience and digital fluency, making them more active than previous generations ever in terms of addressing governmental issues, you know, like climate change, racial equality, social justice, LGBTQ rights, economy inequality, gun violence prevention. All these things were getting people together online, or addressing it through social media in ways that previous generations had, you know, they possibly needed weeks by getting people to hand out posters at libraries or other places like the bank, maybe, you know, places where people would visit often, maybe supermarkets.
Yeah, to touch on that, as I was doing research, there was a study done in 2023 where they recorded, you know, Gen Z, and they're like, how do you feel about government? How do you feel about Congress? And honestly, like, we just don't trust that anymore. Government is seen as a way of like you said earlier, we pay like tax dollars, and then we get like taken care of because we're paying this money to them. But I think our generation has realized, we have been here, that hey, even though we're paying these tax dollars, we don't feel safe anymore. We don't feel like we're being taken care of, and some people are like losing their whole livelihood and losing everything because they just can't afford it anymore. And so they're realizing that us as a generation we're realizing that the Congress and the president and the news is just something you always have to take with a grain of salt. Christian, how do you see people reacting to government nowadays?
So like when Trump was talking about the TikTok ban, Gen Z was openly mad because they thought it was a restriction on their freedom of speech. And in North America, Greta Thunberg and Gen Z, they were making protests against towards climate change, and government institutes, according to Santa Bahadur Thalpa, January 2026 article in Lex Localis. Basically, like Greta Thunberg and some Gen Z, they were protesting against climate change, and my childhood with the saving trees,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of makes sense because we've seen like Barack Obama talk about climate change.
So you feel that like personal connection because you feel like, oh, I've been fighting for this same thing even though I was younger and didn't fully understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we've had a lot of protests ever since like 2020. There was when Roe versus Wade got overturned. There was George Floyd, if you guys remember that. There was the ban that I completely forgot happened. My goodness. Yeah, and there's no King's protests. I've been to a few of those. And even driving around, I was driving to San Francisco one day, and we passed this one bridge, and there was posters, and there's people, and everyone was honking, like, in support, and just the fact that that is so normal nowadays is really weird to, like, experience as a young adult, because when you're a young adult, you're told, oh, the world is your oyster, go out, study what you want to study, be who you want to be. But now it's like, oh, we can't just live anymore. We can't just dream anymore. We need to actually think about, are we going to have enough money for future or our future generations? Are we going to make it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, our generation is facing challenges that previous ones never faced before. It was like the Wild West, land to conquer, to make it your home, and now ours is everything seems to be taken over by those previous generations, and they're still in debt because they probably followed the rat race. They're still purchasing more luxuries,
and now
they're not ready to retire at all.
No way. And now moving on to how do we think that there's a point of return for where we're currently living, our USA government? Do we think we can come back from how far gone we are, or do you think it just has to burn?
So Nepal's 2025 uprising raises the most important questions. Is there any return for the current government? So our most three recent prime minister, they're all being charged of because they were like a corrupt government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like all of them are facing the charges of the misuse of the public funds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very hopeful thing for us as a Nepali people. All of three recent prime ministers, there's what do we call their poverty? Before 3 generations has been everything, the file has been open to rechecked where these funds have come and everything. And every people by the time now, every people are aware, including the Gen Z, of course,
Mm-hmm.
are aware of those peoples, the corrupt peoples. So I don't think now people know whom to trust and whom to not, right?
Yeah.
So it's not bringing down the government, but it's it's most importantly stop fighting and what do we call it? I don't know what I was about to say. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
So what you're trying to say is like not necessarily the whole thing has to go, but
Yeah.
having those good people
That's right.
make sure that the like corrupt people are trialed and all of their work is like double checked.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that could definitely help with the United States government.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, making sure where did this money come from and is
Yes.
it actually benefiting the people?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna get there though, because like you said, even though there are like that one good person, oh, there's that one good person.
Yeah.
There are so many just money-hungry people
Yes.
surrounding them. Yeah, and it's very. I do feel hopeful.
Yeah.
Just I don't know what it's gonna take to get to that point.
Mhm.
Jelvert, do you think that there's any? Do you think we can come back from this, or do you think?
Well, you see, all governments have flaws. I mean, our democracy, it relies on trust, norms, and institutions that can erode from within.
Mm-hmm.
Communism has a tendency toward authoritarian or totalitarian rule. And well, the problem with governmental corruption is that when it's widespread, it weakens public trust, one of our weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Undermines institutions and disrupts government's ability to function effectively. So a point of no return would occur when corruption becomes systematic. Corrupt practices are no longer isolated incidents, but become embedded in the political, legal, and economic systems, such as, I mean, you automatically expect people to offer you a bribe, or, you know, you start seeing more Trump stuff where they could just throw their money and it fixes all their issues. You can pay people to be quiet.
So you think that there's no coming back from this? This is just how it is until something big happens.
No, I think there is a way out of it. I mean, like, we have clear warning signs such as public trust and everything, but all this can be combated by a force that's outside of the system, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like, if I learned anything from Daredevil, I know it's kind of stupid to rely on something like that, but
Oh.
but he tried it the legal way of combating corruption as a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
by bringing evidence and everything. But every time he was being shut out from it, his witnesses were getting kept quiet with hush money. They were being killed off. Cartel sort of stuff. Like,
Actually, relating to Daredevil, this is not the new show. For anyone watching who's like, oh my gosh, the new Daredevil, I haven't. No, this is from the Netflix series where I'm referring to. We've had time and time again where, like you said, Matt Murdock is trying to bring witnesses against Fisk, but Fisk gets them, killed right before their big hearing. That's just what happened when I was watching season 3, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I was really rooting for him. But I feel like what you said about no return is kind of embedded. Like I expect politicians to take bribes. I expect them to put more money in their pockets and not give fair tax cuts. So personally, I believe there is something huge is going to have to happen before we can have the checks and balances, like you said, or having the full trust and transparency that we need to have a healthy form of government. Christian, what do you think? Do you think we can come back from this?
I feel like when I was doing research on Nepal, and they started the protest because the bans on social media, and I was looking at when I didn't know about the protests, and I saw straw hats logos on the protesters' flags. I thought it was inspiring because they use a manga or One Piece to basically they're pirates against a corrupt government.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was inspiring. And I also looked on social media, there's a hashtag Sea-Brings or something, Southeast Asian countries. and Nepal was part of it, like Indonesia, Philippines, and I thought it was inspiring because Gen Z, like when the Donald Trump was talking about the TikTok ban, there was a lot of people against it, and that's why it's still not banned today. So I feel like we could make a change.
Yeah, I remember TikTok was only shut down for like a day. I don't exactly know the ins and outs of why, but it was only down for like one day, and everyone made a huge deal about it. I remember people were moving on to like a Chinese version of like TikTok, like an entertainment platform, because they're like, oh, if the government's so against China, then we're gonna stay with China. We're gonna, use their apps. And I feel like Chinese people are so divided. They're like, why are you in our spaces? But then a lot of them were like, oh my gosh, hi, welcome, hello. It's so nice to make friends. And people were making friends like across the countries. And I was like, it felt like unifying, but so weird. And then TikTok came back and everything slowly went back to normal. And I was like, that's such a weird like moment. But referring back to what you said about One Piece and Daredevil, I think our media reflects what we see nowadays, but also we are a reflection of our entertainment. Younger people using a One Piece flag as a kind of sign of the revolution is something a lot of people can relate to, because a lot of young people have watched or have been watching One Piece for years, and so people feel united in that front. So personally, I think we do have to like kind of sort of in a metaphorical term, like burn the whole system down so that we can allow the good people to be like, okay, now that like these corrupt people are not pulling our legs anymore, now we can do the work that needs to be done to help the country.
So going back to, Daredevil, shows the extent of power money can get you as Kingpin takes over the little FBI police officers. Influence is court by controlling part of the jury through debt, favors, and fear. And the way Daredevil beats all this corruption is by fighting outside of the system as he gathers evidence through obviously illegal methods, such as vigilantism, beating people up till they give him the truth, point them towards evidence. And he's, forcing the truth out into the open. Here in the US at school, they teach us that the government has 3 branches that do checks and balances so that not one is more powerful than the other. However, I think there are really 4. Some people also agree. We the people are the outside branch responsible for keeping the internal branches in check through public pressure, truth, and accountability. So when democracy fails, it becomes our responsibility and our right to pursue deep, peaceful, structural reform that rebuilds the system so it serves the public again.
So you think we need to step outside of these rules placed by these powerful, corrupt people in order to make sure that the checks and balances that should be our law are actually held to full accountability?
I think we gotta be the outside force in the system that sets things right, keeps the checks and the balances, as I said, What's the point of a government that doesn't serve you,
So we gotta be Daredevil. That's what
I'm
we're
not-
telling our audience, gotta be
I'm not-
Daredevil.
Yes, be the outside force in the system that sets things right, but I'm not saying to take it into violent matters. That's always should be a last recourse.
Yeah. Maybe not fully Daredevil, but just a little bit. Any final thoughts, anybody?
So I just wanted to share one more thing, coming to my point back. So there are signs of attempt to rebuild. According to Nepal News April 2026 article, Nepal's new anti-corruption strategic plan. What is it and why it matters? Nepal has released a draft second national anti-corruption strategic plan covering 2025 to 2031, introducing oversight of private businesses for the first time with 25 policies and 129 specific actions with clear deadlines.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing those things that you hoped for.
That's right.
Awesome.
And I forgot to add one more thing. So after the GenZ movement, whatever things happened, the government was brought down. Like you said, you were so happy to see the women running for the president.
Yeah, like women being given leadership.
Yes. So for the first time in Nepal, after the government was stepped down, there has to be someone in the country to lead for a while until the stable government has been made.
Mhm.
So Susila Karki was the first women prime minister to be in that positions, and yeah, we were also happy. So she hold it into the government on for 6 months
Mhm.
until the new government was built up.
So that must be like really hopeful.
Yes.
Especially for younger women in Nepal being like, oh, I can be, you said prime minister?
That's right.
You can be a prime minister, you can be in government and be that like sign of change.
Yeah.
Anyone else, final thoughts?
Well, I got a couple. Okay. So, often they make parodies about people, have you seen the Boondocks?
No?
How they make fun of black people in a parody, of course. Not like racist way or anything, but they make fun of them because some people legit chose Barack Obama just because he was black. And they were, they wanted to be team players, they wanted representation, which is totally fine, but sometimes choosing things just because you think they're going to represent you often cloud your judgment into making decisions that obviously alter the lives of everyone,
So, like, we as people need to do background research into who we decide to trust.
I think that sometimes the new gens are always we can be impulsive,
Yeah.
I mean, sure, we've experienced school shootings and all this other stuff that gives us a fair argument as to ban this, completely overturn the Second Amendment. But I mean, those things are in place for a reason. I mean, what if we ever have to fight, the government itself
Mm-hmm.
so we can overturn it in a worst case scenario?
I think the solution to this is our generation being more skeptical, looking into things, making sure checks and balances are made, looking into previous politicians and how they kind of shaped our world. And I think we can make a new and better system when we finally have the space to do so. And I think this is a great place to wrap up our podcast. We discussed how we were introduced to government growing up. Then we transitioned into how we see newer generations kind of responding to current political events. And finally, we discussed how we think the government downfall is going to lead us. I am your host, Jess. This is our cast, Christian, Anusha, and Jelvert. And thank you for seeing our podcast.